Good morning, everyone. We welcome you to our Saturday morning Bible study. It's December 16th, 2017. We are recording from the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent, Plainfield, New Jersey, the United States of America. And this morning, our moderator is Linda from Pennsylvania.
Good morning. I'm going to start by reading from Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy. Quote, acquaintance with the original text and willingness to give up human beliefs established by hierarchies and instigated sometimes by the worst passions of men open the way for Christian Science to be understood and make the Bible the chart of life, where the buoys and healing currents of truth are pointed out. End quote.
Thank you.
Yes.
This morning our topic was the day the sun stood still. Tom and I both worked on this together, so he's actually going to start out with a little overview for us. Are you there, Tom?
I am here.
Great. I'll let you go ahead, and then I'll follow with questions.
But before we do that, did anybody have any comments on the text?
Well, I just think it's so insightful that she includes as one of the criteria here our willingness to give up human beliefs, which if I examine my own thinking, honestly, it's not an easy thing to do. In fact, it's one of the more difficult things to do.
But at least we have a chart of life. I like that.
I was reading somewhere where Science and Health, it really is just a reminder of what we already know. And because we do have that mind of Christ, also a re-education of all these beliefs that she's saying here. They've been established by hierarchies and instigated by sometimes by the worst passions of men. So that is its purpose, to rid us of these false beliefs, to cleanse us, I should say, of false beliefs. And that's why we need to keep reading it and studying it and listening to it, taking the truth in, renewing our minds to get rid of these false beliefs. And also the acquaintance with original text, that's interesting too. How was it originally said? Because what do people do when they reinterpret it? We must interpret it ourselves on a spiritual basis and not have someone tell us what it's saying. Except, of course, Mrs. Eddy.
I think some of the interpretations probably lose the spirit of it, of the word.
Absolutely.
Tendency of the human mind is to devolve into an intellectual exercise, which is something that the human mind is comfortable with, but it doesn't lead us anywhere.
That's where I find the American Standard Version of the Bible, which is used in the Episcopal Church now. I think it loses a great deal of the spiritual interpretation of the Bible.
Well, thank you. I know, and I've heard that the organization uses other interpretations now. We stay with the King James Version. If you know the history, we know how tried and true that version is.
Well, the point being, God is speaking. The question is, how well are we listening? So that takes some effort and discipline, but it's the way.
I think in a way...
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
No, I was going to say, It's almost like what people say about science and health. Nobody understands it. Why isn't it in a more simpler language and all that? But I think it being a spiritual book, we have to come humble, and then as we grow, as our spiritual senses develop, then we imbibe the spirit of it. Otherwise, it's just coming with the human mind and getting it intellectually, which doesn't help too much in the end.
Thank you, Florence. And I think that there may be some of that in what she says here when she says acquaintance with the original text. That not only is it important that we acquaint ourselves with the words in the King James, but that we open our thought to be acquainted with the spiritual intent behind it. In other words, our attitude matters as much as our study.
Yeah, Michael from California told me, because he's fairly new here, but he said no one ever had told him that before we study our lesson, we were always taught to pray, open my heart to be receptive to the truth in these books. Our receptivity, and we pray for that receptivity, that we're not, as Florence said, full of the human mind and resisting and trying to interpret it humanly, which it cannot be interpreted humanly. And the other thing is you will never understand it until you start to practice and live it. And that's the big thing. People just want to read it and think they're going to get it. You can't just read it. You've got to live it, just as in math where you have to work out the problem. You can't just read about math. You've got to work the problems out. And especially intellectuals, they just want to sit in their chair and read it and think somehow they're going to understand it. Well, you can read that God is love, and you can read that you should be loving, but unless you do that, you will not understand it, nor will you progress. You must practice it. The practicing provable science. It cannot just be read. It must be lived, and that includes the Bible, too.
But that's what sets Plainfield apart 100%, is that it is taught here how to do that, and it makes me think of going to class. I asked my teacher if we were going to be asked, like Mrs. Eddy asked her pupils, to go out and take a case. And my relief, she said no. But in retrospect, I see that was a huge problem there, because whose idea was it that class instruction no longer had to do that? If Mrs. Eddy did it, then it was very important. And I'm sure that if the person came back saying that they were unsuccessful or whatever, then she would figure out and explain to them where they had gone wrong with it. So practice, as you just pointed out, is so critical to the use of Christian Science.
Thank you, Mike. Very true.
The apprenticeship.
Yeah. And once you name the name of science, you are all practitioners, because practitioners means practicing.
There are healings going on all the time, but a lot of people go wrong because they're looking for something big and dramatic. But what about every little good thing that comes into your life? Isn't that a sign that God is omnipresent and omnipotent? Yes, it is. So if we acknowledge those and magnify those in our life, we'll be much more ready for what comes next.
Yes, someone told me how much they loved Lillian's testimony from Wednesday night, where she, it was just a simple thing where she'd gone to the car dealer, but it was an expression of God's presence and power with her, and she saw it and was grateful for it. And this is living the science and seeing God ever present with us and acknowledging His presence. And as you do that, you will find the other big so-called named diseases and other problems that sometimes come up, they won't happen. Because it's either through science or suffering. And if you're living the science, it will spare you of the suffering. Go ahead, Mike.
Yes, but I have to say again that that's the difference. When I came out of class, I was told that I was a practitioner, and I was very pleased with that. But then when things didn't quite work out, there was no explanation, for example, of how am I feeling. If I'm feeling bad, that's when I have to turn to God until I feel good, and I'm at peace. I know that then I've done it properly. Because what I did was, I, by mistake, turned myself to looking at my body for results. I thought healing was so critical, which it is, but I didn't look to the mental because I didn't know any better. So when I looked to the body, I actually trained myself to indulge more in the body than in the spirit. And that's one of the things that I have to correct now. And I'm grateful to be doing it, but I wish I hadn't learned it wrong to begin with.
Yeah.
It's never too late.
Never too late.
Oh, dear.
Well, I agree it's never too late, but I could have been more helpful to the world if I'd... I mean, it was the same thing. We had a watch group in our association, which I'm grateful for. But when I asked, how do I watch, I said, just do it. And it's like, well, I just did it wrong for years. You can remember how many times I asked here, how do I watch properly? And thankfully, I got answers. So thank you very much.
I'm sure they were taught wrong, too, so they didn't know.
Yeah.
What could they do?
Well, there again, it's only in the living it that you can explain it to others. You can't. You can't. You have to be living it. And as I've told people, we've been through boot camp here with all the years of the trial and all the nights we've been up watching and all the times of handling animal magnetism. It wasn't just a walk in the park. And all the wonderful literature we've been given to read, unauthorized, according to the organization. So that's why we can share, and that's why we are here, to share what we have learned so others can do it too. So this truth will continue through the ages. So, Tom, we can talk the whole time on it.
Okay. So we'll talk about Joshua. It would be nice, hopefully, if you did, that's okay, but we did have optional background readings. Joshua chapters 3 to 11 to kind of give some sort of context to our questions in chapter 10. So basically, from chapters 3 to 11, the Israelites were camped out in the land of Moab, and they crossed the river Jordan, killed many people, took over the land, and they rested. So that's kind of what those chapters are about. There are a number of lessons about keeping the covenant and having faith in God, and I would look to what's in the lesson to kind of understand those lessons. So we've got Romans 13, verses 1 to 3, and Deuteronomy 10, 12 to 14. Okay, Joshua chapter 3. So they set out from Shittim, which was on the plains of Moab, north of the Dead Sea, and they went across the Jordan River. Now, the Ark of the Covenant went before them, and the Jordan River was at flood stage. When I got there, the water stopped, and the priests took the Ark out to mid-river, and then they stayed there while everybody crossed. For those who read these chapters, if you have something you want to add on chapter 3, or if you want to correct me, that's good too. Just speak up.
Well, it's just that when the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant walked into the river dried up, even at its flood stage. The water stopped flowing, and it wasn't even muddy when they went across. It was dry when they went across. And they all went across and finished, and the priests came out with the Ark of the Covenant before the water came back. And actually, before the water came back, they sent 12 guys in there.
Okay, well, we're moving on now. So that was chapter 3, right? So we'll go to chapter 4? Yes?
Go ahead.
Like say that.
Okay. Anything on chapter 3?
Well, I read it was as important in many ways as Moses crossing the Red Sea. It was a very tremendous, what would you call it? I wouldn't call it a miracle or even a healing, but
But the water stopped,
right.
and they walked across on dry land.
Huge demonstration of
yeah,
God's
huge,
power
that's right, huge demonstration of God's power. Thank you.
and the importance of obedience.
Yes.
And Joshua was one of the few that actually saw it happen when they crossed the Red Sea.
True.
Correct.
Thank you. Yeah, he was there. So he had this confidence in God, tremendous confidence.
Okay, chapter 4. So after they crossed the river, Joshua told the 12 tribes that each one of them was to pick one man, and then those 12 men were to go back to the middle of the river where the ark was, and the priest, and then each of the 12 men were to pick up a stone and carry it on their shoulders. And so then after crossing the river, they were ahead of them were 40,000 armed men ready for battle. So they were certainly prepared. Then Joshua commanded the priests with the ark to bring it out of the river. And as soon as they got out of the river, the waters of the river came back. And interestingly, they came back at flood stage. Then they camped at Gilgal on the eastern border of Jericho, and that's where they set the 12 stones down. And this was to let the world know about their crossing the River Jordan, which was the same as, similar to, let's say, as crossing the Red Sea. Again, if anybody wants to correct me or add to that, please feel free.
Well, wasn't that the time that they circumcised all the Israelites, because they hadn't ever circumcised anybody since they went into?
Well, I think we're getting to that. I don't think we've gotten there yet.
Okay.
Where is that? No, maybe you're right.
Really, was that Gilgal I read?
Well, anyway.
No, maybe you're right. Let's see.
It's chapter 5.
Is it 5?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm ahead. I'm ahead.
But anyway,
Okay, we're not quite there yet. Okay, but we'll get there. So that's an important event. All right, so chapter 5.
Wait, Bruce, Bruce
yes,
wants
go
to
ahead, please.
How soon this miracle, I'll call it a miracle, would have been forgotten. The need for having a setup of the stones. Every day we need to remind ourselves of the power and presence of God, who He is, who we are in His image and likeness. Human mind would like to forget these things. They didn't carry those stones over there for no reason at all. Here they are, a bunch of river stones, out of place. How could they possibly have gotten there, except for the fact that they remembered this remarkable event about the river drying up? Let us never forget what God has done.
Thank you. That's a very important point of this story, and it makes it practical for us here today and now. Not just the story we're reading about, but how do we apply it to our lives? We must do these things. That's why you've been told to keep a gratitude journal, to write down what God has done. Remember, that's why I give testimony on Wednesday. Remember what He's done. And never, ever poo-poo, another person's testimony. I have sometimes heard, oh, well, thinking of Lillian's testimony, oh, well, wasn't some physical healing or this or that. Well, as so what? And as Bruce said, and this kind of living prevents these big physical things from coming up in the first place. So everyone that comes needs to watch their thoughts when they're listening to testimonies and make sure that they are seeing God. Most of you do, but I'm just addressing, because sometimes I've heard things, addressing people who are poo-pooing what someone else might say. And if I know that's being done, you might see your head rolling down an aisle.
That's an important point, because when we attend church, it's supposed to be extraordinarily unselfish.
Yes.
And so if we're listening to a testimony or groaning saying, oh, well, I could have said that better, or whatever it is, I make it up. But, we should be supporting that person.
Thank you.
That's what we do.
Yes.
Yeah, because we are not giving the testimony for our group. It's not. It's for the world. I've heard people, comment, oh, I heard such and such, and they are not here. I mean, physically in the United States or anything. So you don't know who, where will be hearing something, as simple as it might sound, or as much as you think you've heard it before. So.
Exactly. And what Tom said is true. We're supporting each other. And if your testimony is simple from the heart, and if it helped you, it will help someone else. Now, if there ever is any corrections needed on testimonies, believe me, that happens as well, as some of you know. What we don't want are long, intellectual, drawn-out things that people can't understand. But and that must be corrected. But anyway, so yes, we support each other, and we remember all the wonderful things that God has done. You keep a riverbed of stones at your house.
I know when I read that, I thought of you, Mary, before, saying that we need to remember our victories. So that's what I thought of. So,
yeah.
And I think the simple testimonies are very encouraging to people, because they think, wow, I could do that.
Yes.
Maybe I can't heal the world or something, but I could do that.
Exactly.
And small steps.
Yes.
That's where it starts.
But I have to say, too, that this is not simple. It's actually more complicated, because the person, me, who studied my body so diligently, when I saw the ones where people around the situation had to come into consonance to make it happen, that's a bigger power, showing the bigger power of God, because it affects the people around that person, not just that individual person.
Well, yes, it affects everything around you when you allow the power of God to govern you. It's not more complicated, it's just more all-encompassing.
I wanted to say thank you for the comment about appreciating the, quote, small testimonies, because they help me a lot. And it's also been said there are no small or large miracles or testimonies in God.
Thank you.
They all count. Thank you.
That's very beautiful, and that is very true. You see, this is where we fall short. When so many wonderful things happen, like as Lillian explained, with everything working out so well, and we never even thank God. We just take it for granted, which she did not do. So it's actually a very tremendous lesson, and there are no small or large. We've heard it's all the same. Any healing is the same. We only think in our heads that it's small or large, but it's all God working, and the more we see it, the more we will have it. Thank you.
Okay. Chapter 5. So when they heard about the crossing, the Amorite kings and Canaanite kings, their hearts melted in fear, and they no longer had the courage to face the Israelites. Then at Gilgal, as Gary had mentioned, all the men were circumcised, as they did not circumcise the men who were born in the wilderness. And then they celebrated the Passover, and then the next day after that, the manna stopped. And then Joshua met the captain of the Lord's host. So if anybody wants to add to that, or...
Here's something else that's very significant that only God could have done. God fed them for 40 years with manna. On the very day that they didn't need it anymore, they're ready to eat the fruit of the land of Canaan, the manna stopped.
And what was this Lord of the hosts that came to Joshua? Well, anyway, yeah, he came to Joshua. Joshua said, "Are you for us or against us?" And the guy said,
Nay.
"Nay."
I really like that part because it's
Yeah.
he's saying, no, either you're for us or against us.
Yeah, and he said, "Joshua, loose thy shoe from off thy foot, for the place whereon thou standest is holy." In other words, be my humble servant or else.
It's like Moses all over again.
Exactly. Here they'd had this tremendous crossing of the Jordan. God was doing just this tremendous stuff. God told Joshua, "I will exalt you in front of all the Israelites because you're with me." And here he's coming to him and saying, "Don't let it go to your head. I'm in charge, so stay humble."
The timing of this was especially good, too, because looking forward, Joshua and the band of Israelites are about to embark upon a series of battles, which from a military standpoint would be impossible for them. So God was preparing him for, I think, for that next few steps that he's going to be taking. You humble yourself before me, and all will go well.
And there's a little bit of a reminder of Moses in the burning bush, where he told him that he was on holy ground and to take off his sandals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting, and just I think every one of these biblical stories, there are tremendous men who are humble and listening to God, but there's always a clear sense that there's no way they could have won these battles or done what they did if it hadn't been for God. There's no way the water, the river Jordan would have dried up. A lot of these battles they could not have won if it hadn't been for the hand of God. It is very, very clear. God working. That's why we must never forget or get blown up and think we're doing it, because we're in big trouble when that happens.
Yeah, wait till we get to chapter 7. That'll be interesting. Cool. All right, chapter 6. Now, the Israelites marched around the city of Jericho. They blew trumpets. The people were silent and did this every day for 6 days. On the 7th day, they blew the trumpets, and all the people shouted for the Lord. And the walls fell down flat. They went and destroyed everything in the town except for Rehab, the harlot, and her father's household. And Joshua said the city of Jericho would now be rebuilt, and the fame of Joshua went out all across the land.
And they were told to burn everything and to kill everything in Jericho.
I think there's one other item that's very significant. That's verse number 2. This is before any of this ever happened. It says, "The Lord said unto Joshua, See, I have given unto thee thine hand Jericho and the king thereof." So before they even approached Jericho, God had already told them, I have given them into your hand. He didn't march into Jericho with a sense of pride or anything selfish. He was a humble servant of the Lord. He didn't even go there or do anything until God had told him, I have given them into your hand.
Going back to what Gary was saying about the burning everything, seems to be kind of a theme with Joshua, and when he gives them his last thoughts before he dies, he tells them that he wants them to have no fellowship with anything that could lead them to be unfaithful to God. And I really think that's really what the burning of everything was to destroy. And as we're learning here at Plainfield, anything that would take us mentally in our prayers make stands. And I think it's very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what this was all about. And the only thing that they were allowed to take was the gold and the silver, and that was to go into the synagogue, to the treasury of the church.
Oh, that's a good segue into chapter 7.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and how does this apply to us?
For me, it was very important to think about what could take me off from being unfaithful to God, to knowing God is all power. And it goes back to that beautiful thing read on Wednesday, that all our aim and ambition and love should be for God. Watch those little thoughts that try to get a toehold.
Well, this is it. These thoughts that come that aren't of God, they have to be destroyed. You don't fool around with them. You don't just brush them aside or say, I'll think about it. I'll think about that in a few hours. And so how do you destroy it?
Know the truth. It's not from God.
Yes?
No, and replace it with the truth.
Yes. What does Mrs. Eddy say? You know, the word from our leader. If your thought is so filled with life, truth, and love, if it's so filled with gratitude and praise to God, there's no room for any of this. That's really what does it. And she also says in Watch's Prayers and Arguments, the camp of a defeated enemy must be
destroyed.
Yes.
She also says to expunge our material history, so she's strong on that, destroying.
Thank you very much, because that comes around, especially this time of year, where you start thinking about your past.
And what's the principle behind this? I mean, this can sound kind of rough to some people. But what's the principle behind this? Because this is not us doing something. This is
life,
us.
truth, and love is a law of annihilation to anything unlike them.
Thank you. Thank you. What we're talking about here is not one person being cruel to another, or anything like that. We're talking about living a godlike life and being the expression of God who makes us, who made us. This is divine principle in action, period. It is life, truth, and love lived, period.
And if we do this individually and as a people and as a nation, the more we do it, we won't find wars down the road where we are actually having to bomb and kill everybody. Because this starts in our own thoughts, all the greed, the lust, the hatred, all of this. That's where it is.
The acceptance of false human beliefs.
Yes.
Making them laws governing our lives.
Yes.
Tolerating little things that are wrong, letting them grow. No, if something's wrong, you cut it off. cut its head off.
You don't dilly-dally around with it. And this is a mental warfare. The battleground is mental, and that's what we're talking about. And that's why, if you keep repeating your history, if you keep bringing up all this stuff in your past and all the injustices, you are keeping it alive. You've got to destroy those thoughts. As we're told, get over it. And I say that with respect. Get over it.
It struck me in them being able to take the gold and silver because that had already been burned and purified, so that was okay to take with them.
Right, you can't burn it up. And where does it belong?
To God.
All belongs to God.
Exactly. So that's a good lesson too. So all of the jobs we have, the businesses we have, the work that we do that earns money, what is it for? If it isn't put to use for God, it isn't worth anything.
Glorify God.
Okay, chapter 7. The Israelites were unfaithful to the accursed things. And Achan took some of them, he took some of the accursed things. And he buried them, so he hid them away. So we kind of talked about the accursed things. So you're not supposed to take anything, except they did take the gold and silver. I guess they melted it down. Then Joshua sent some men to spy on the Ai, and when the spies came back, they basically said, no big deal, we don't need everybody. So Joshua sent 2,000 to 3,000 men, and then the Ai routed them and killed some of them. And so Joshua was very troubled about what happened. So then he assembled everybody, and Joshua had each of the families come forward, and Achan admitted to his sin. And so then Israel stoned Achan and his family. Okay.
Well, one rotten apple spoils the bunch. And that's where we, again, in our thinking, you think you can indulge in a little bit of error, and it will just come and bring all its friends. So we have to watch our mentality and keep it pure. Keep our homes pure as much as we can, everything else, our church, our nation. But if you are living this truth, that quote from Mrs. Eddy, life, truth, and love are a law of annihilation against anything unlike themselves. If you are living life, truth, and love, it will annihilate anything that's unlike itself. It can't come near you. It won't come near you. Whether it's thoughts, whether it's an evil person, a so-called evil person, whether it's a disease, whether it's a financial loss, whatever it is, it can't come near you when you're living the truth. It's a law of annihilation against everything unlike itself. But the key there is living it. And that doesn't include reading about it, living it. And if we do this, in our watches and as a nation, we will keep that true for our country. We won't have these invasions of things. It won't be able to come. It just won't. And we do it for our nation and for our world. Why we watch. But it starts with you as an individual, keeping it out of your experience because you're living it. You're expressing those synonyms of God, not just occasionally, but throughout the day.
Okay. Chapter 8. So now Joshua took the whole army, and he went to attack the Ai. he took 30,000 of their best warriors who then went out to set up for an ambush. Then Joshua took the rest of the men, and they lured out the men of Ai, and the Ai pursued them. Meanwhile, the 30,000 of those best warriors entered the city and set it to fire and just started destroying everything. And now the men of Ai found that they were caught in the middle between the Israelites, and the Israelites killed them all, except for the king. And then they took the king and they impaled him. Then after that, they went and renewed the covenant. This is described in Deuteronomy. I think it's fascinating. So they went to Mount Ebal. There they built an altar, and half the people stood in front of Mount Gerizim, and the other half stood in front of Mount Ebal. And then Joshua read all the words of the law. Highlights from chapter 8.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, chapter 9. So then all the kings west of Jordan decided to wage war against the Israelites, except for the Gibeonites. The Gibeonites did a ruse with the Israelites and said they were from a distant country and asked for a treaty and told the Israelites, we'll be your servants. The Israelites did not inquire of the Lord, and they went ahead and made this treaty with the Gibeonites. Then the Israelites found out that the Gibeonites were really next-door neighbors. They did not kill them, but they made them woodcutters and water carriers for the altar of the Lord. Right? Then in chapter 10, the kings gathered together to attack the Gibeonites because they had made this treaty with the Israelites. And the Gibeonites went to Israel and reminded them of the treaty and asked for help. So the Lord discomfited them, and the Israelites, slew all the armies of the kings. And the Lord cast great stones on them and hailstones, and this is when the sun stood still until everyone was killed. The 5 kings fled. In the cave, the Israelites found the kings, killed them, and hanged them. Joshua then went on to different kingdoms and killed everyone, and they succeeded because the Lord God of Israel fought for Israel. Then in chapter 11, more kings gathered together to fight the Israelites, and they were as many as the sands upon the seashore, with horses and chariots. So my editorial, but there's no way that the Israelites are going to be able to conquer them. But again, the Israelites were obedient to the Lord, and they killed them all. So therefore, Joshua took the whole land, and they rested. Okay, so we just went through all the chapters through chapter 11. Mm-hmm. So we kind of put that in context. Crossed the river, took over the land, killed the people, made covenant, rested. Some good lessons there.
Yep.
So maybe, Linda, you want to go on with the questions?
Okay. I don't know if anyone, I think we've sort of talked about who Joshua was. If anyone wants to add anything?
Well, I read, he was born a slave and was treated by the terrible Egyptian slave masters. And then really he was the apprentice of Moses, the second in command, and he humbly obeyed Moses and learned from Moses. I've always felt apprenticeship is the best way to learn anything. If you want to learn to do something well, you spend time with someone who knows how to do it well. I'm much better than a college education. Well, I shouldn't say that, but in those days, for apprenticeship,
cases,
in many cases, apprenticeship. And I speak for myself, who I trained to be a teacher, but the best thing how I learned to teach was by being in a classroom with a good teacher and learning from her. That's how I learned, not from sitting in a classroom reading books, but by doing it. So that's how Joshua learned and how he got this great confidence in God so that he could go. And this was his job. Moses had a certain job. Joshua's job was to be this great. He was a great warrior, wasn't he? He won all these battles. Tremendous. And I thought this was interesting too, because he used to have a different name. I think it was Hosea, son of
Hosea. Hosea.
And Moses gave him a new name, Joshua, which is the Lord of salvation. And I read that the Israelites, if they were concerned about someone's welfare, they would change their name and sort of giving them a protection by their name, which I thought was interesting. I didn't know why they did that or why names had so much meaning, because they do in the Bible. All these names have meanings, and some names get changed. Well, that was why. It was symbolic, just symbolic of God being with Joshua. So those are some things I read about Joshua. And also, of course, he was the one who spied out the land with Caleb.
And 10 other guys gave the false report.
And that is a hugely important lesson for us. And what is that lesson? Because Caleb and Joshua came back after spying out the land, and what did they see?
The giants. That just said it was humanly impossible to go there and take it over.
No, that was the other.
No, they didn't see the giants. The others seen they saw the giants, right?
Yes.
They saw the wonderful fertile land, the milk and the honey and cattle, and how wonderful it was.
Spiritual sense sees differently from.
And let this be written on your forehead. May you never forget this. You could have two people experiencing the exact same thing. One person will see the hole in the donut, and the other person will see the donut. And the one who sees the hole in the donut will complain and then end up hating the one who sees the donut because they see the donut and I don't see the donut, and they have everything and I don't. It's all within your own thought. So there's no need for any of that, okay? That's a huge, important example of it. We had 2 people and 10 people, the same situation. Caleb and Joshua had the spiritual sense and saw the truth. And because of that, they were able to win victories, have tremendous, God was with them, while the others just grouse and complain and everything is wrong, and so they reap what they sowed. And then half the time, those that do that, they get jealous and hateful and angry of those who are reaping the good. Instead, what do they need to do?
Change their glasses.
Yes, change your glasses. It's available to everybody. No one has a corner on this. So jealousy, all that stuff's verboten. It just shows you're lazy. You don't want to do the work that's required. So cut it out. Do what you should and be happy, for heaven's sake.
And the positive and the negative. The negative pushes things away. The positive attracts good. The negative,
it does. Yeah. If you're in that negative state, do you think people are going to hire you? You think you're going to find good work while you're grousing and complaining? You're pushing all the good away from you. You think you're going to find a great companion? You think you're going to find a great home? You're pushing it all away. And it's all within you. God is no respecter of person. And some people don't like to hear this. They'd rather think that they are misfortunate and that there's reasons why they're so miserable. They would rather think that, because then they feel they're off the hook. They're not responsible. It's out of their control. They're just,
Born at the wrong time in the wrong place, and went to the wrong school, and had
wrong
the wrong
family.
parents.
Yeah, it's all. You have to play the cards that you've been dealt. But if you play them right, all kinds of wonderful things can happen. If you play them wrong, you will seem to lose, at least for a while, until you wake up.
And it's never too late, folks. You can turn on a dime.
You can prove this. Don't take my word or anyone's word for it. Prove it for yourself. And as we've talked about, sometimes it doesn't happen in a day. That's another thing. When it's, you try it for a week, it doesn't work, so you're back to that again. Many people who have accomplished what they've accomplished, it has taken years. So
there was a quote I came across that was mentioned along with Joshua for his patience, and it comes from Exodus, where God promises. He says, it's Exodus 23:30. Little by little I will drive them out from before you until you have increased and possessed the land. I thought that was really beautiful, just what you just said. It takes patience. We were talking about that last week too.
Yes, and in the story of when the 5 kings attacked, I think we talked about this in one of our other Bible studies, but Joshua waited until the aggressors came after him. If he hadn't, he would have had to gone and confronted those kings individually. It would have been a lot more work, right? First he would have to go to that king, and that's then this one, and all these were all the so-called enemies. But he waited. They all ganged up on him, and then he had a great opportunity. It was all God's work, all God's plan, so we must wait and not jump the gun, as we saw Sarah do in last week's Bible study. You wait. And he was able to take care of it all at once. And God did rain the hailstones down, or whatever they were, and stop the sun. God was on his side because he was in the rhythm with God. He was in motion with God. He wasn't working against God's plans. He was being with God's plans. And you should be able to feel that yourself. Don't jump the gun or think you've got to do it or get impatient or get into that human reasoning. Joshua waited. And in doing so, he made a tremendous victory. And he got all those, 5 of them, all at once. That's why he was such a great general. I've been reading the biography about Grant, too. He was like that. He waited. He was very poised, very deliberate, not full of human will and planning and scheming, but he had this sense of, it is a oneness with God, I don't know whether he recognized it or not, but it was. He could hear God speaking, and he followed. That takes a lot of courage, especially when you have a lot of men who might get killed if you do something wrong. It takes a lot of poise and courage to do that, which Joshua had.
To go along with that, in Numbers 27, it says, Joshua, quote, a man in whom is the Spirit.
Thank
end
you.
Quote.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think this waiting on God is just so important, because I find that even sometimes when you say, Father, just show me the next step, it's the step that you want to take that you want him to, make it available. I found that I did that. And it's what God wants next.
Yes.
And to just go.
You're so right. I have made that mistake so many times.
Yeah.
Where I'll sort of get an idea that something needs to be done, and then I'll rush and do something screwed up. But I should have just waited for the opportunity, I guess you can call it, to come to me.
I was thinking about this for our church. Because if you get impatient and think, well, we need this, we need that, and how come we don't have more of this and more of that, it's frustration. But I have seen, if we just happily take each day as it comes, do the best we can as God directs us to, when the time comes, what we need will be there. Give us today our daily bread. When we needed Jeremy, he was there. When we needed an organist, the organist was there. Both of them. And we needed, years ago, we needed a printer, a publisher, that came. When we needed someone to organize all our books and papers, God brought Lyndon Shardy. Just when we needed. And we didn't have to go searching. They came. We need proofers, God brings the proofers. Lesson writers, God brings that. All we do is keep praying and knowing and expressing Him the best we can.
Even each watch and forum post and everything, you can't write it a week ahead of time.
Thank you. Very true. Yes. And that's how we all live our lives. And yes, you need to write something on the forum, it'll come. You need to write a lesson, it'll come. There's infinite supply. Whatever's needed will come at the time. But there is a sense that it's not you doing it. It's God working. And that's a huge difference. The other is frustrating and also exhausting. And unsuccessful, unloving. It's the human mind. It doesn't work.
So we got a couple of minutes, Linda. Anything else you want to cover?
Yeah, actually it went very well.
Yes, it was very beautiful. I can just open up if anyone wanted to add something to this.
Just wanted to add that painting I did of the Jordan River. You look across, and Jericho is just beyond the trees in the upper left-hand corner. But that is what the Israelites saw when they looked across. Of course, the river was much higher then, but that is that's Gilgal. That's the lower mountains across the river where they were looking at Jericho. So that big green field is the promised land they're about to step into.
Well, thank you. We're very grateful to Luann and her beautiful artwork. She's our artist in residence for our magazine. Thank you, Luann.
If nobody has any more to say, I did want to read a little piece from the article Day, because after doing this Bible study, that it meant so much more to me.
Sure.
Okay. Quote, "This day is the very action of omniscience. There is no power manifested in this day but omnipotence. This day has divine order, and it comes about scientifically. All requirements of this day are established and do not require time. This day is spirit, not matter, and do not let material things say I am in any incident of creation." And there's a lot in there, but that was the part that I wanted to share.
And that's Mary Baker Eddy?
This is Bicknell Young's article on Day.
Okay.
That we have on the website and also is read.
Thank you.
I found something in Mary Baker Eddy, Her Spiritual Precepts by Gilbert Carpenter. The Bible records that Joshua made the sun stand still so that the earth, which had been turning for countless decades, lingered for a day. This demonstration was made so that mortals might realize that when man functions with God, his power operating through man is as strong and able to perform miracles as mortals believe that it is apart from me. It is sad to realize that most readers of the Bible do not believe in their hearts that this miracle ever happened. They do not believe that man ever did such a thing, and they are right if they mean unaided man. but it was done through God's power to prove that his infinite power can be exercised by man.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Very good.
And I have mentioned in times past in the uses boxes that we received, there was a article from a scientific magazine saying that, you know, there was actually scientific proof that
That there's an extra day in history that's not recorded.
Yeah.
A day missing.
Day missing. But of course, there are those who poo-poo that as well and say it's not true. So, but you decide in your own heart, are you going to believe these things? Or are you going to believe what Era tells you? I mean, where is your faith? Your faith in God or not? And if it's in God, you will feel that these things, yes, are very true. Can be demonstrated again today, if need be. And if you know the history of our country, and probably other nations too, they have been proven. All kinds of things went on during the Revolutionary War, and I'm sure,
And since.
there's no explanation but the hand of God. So, is the universe, including man, evolved by atomic force? No.
Atomic force is a non sequitur. There is no power in matter.
Thank God for Mrs. Eddy and Christian Science.
Yeah.
And thank you, Tom and Linda. Thank you both.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and next week, no Bible study and no round table. Next week is Christmas weekend. And we'll have 2 services on Sunday. So no Bible study, no round table. And the following week, we'll see. That's New Year's weekend. We have a volunteer for that.
We have one. Mike
we do.
volunteered for the Bible, yeah.
Okay, great. All right, well, we'll resume.
We'll presume on New Year's Eve. Or
Yes.
day.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.